All right, here we are. I have been looking forward to this. Christopher, is it pronounced Kluver?
It is. It
Yeah,
is. You can call me Chris.
Chris. All right, Chris, you've got more experience in business and in guiding business people than probably the average age of most entrepreneurs are out there. And I'll give you a little bit about him. Chris is a trusted strategic advisor. He's an author and he's a speaker with almost 40 years of experience. And he's an expert in helping CEOs become leaders. He also helps them navigate challenges and embrace our disruptive times. All right, Chris, tell us a little bit about you, like early on. Where I know you're outside of Denver now, but where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up?
I grew up Midwest. Grew up Midwest in the '80s, and I'm reasonably dyslexic, so I learn differently, and I connect dots in a very different way. And my old man was an attorney. My mom was a high school principal, and to have their kid have a hard time reading and not connecting dots ended up being a challenge, to say the least. But long story short is I solve problems very differently, and it's turned into becoming the greatest gift I ever received. But I started my first business, geez, I was probably 10, and then, shoveling walks and mowing lawns and working my way up. But I started my first company when I was 19. And since that time, I've had almost 16 different companies. And I've had the good fortune to work with hundreds and hundreds of leaders from around the world. And got a handful of companies that we've worked with where we started from entrepreneurial, and been able to run them all the way up to $1 billion market caps. So I'm very, very, very fortunate to have found that niche that just really lights me up, that I get super jacked every day to show up.
And first of all, what was that first company at 19?
Clothing design, manufacturing, wholesale.
What year
So
was that?
I started it in wow, 87.
Where
Holy shit.
where was the manufacturing back in 87?
Manufacturing, we did it locally. So I ended up with contract cut and sew companies. One was based out of Kansas, one was based out of Wyoming. I went to school at Wyoming. It was mostly outdoor active gear and different types of challenges.
Those are all long gone. I tried to manufacture in the US and man, this is 10, 15 years ago. I couldn't find a factory. It was all overseas now.
There's actually some that are coming back. It's crazy, but tech is making it easier and easier, and the margins are getting better to where it's not quite it's still piecework, but it's almost customized piecework. It's crazy what's starting to get reshored. But
Oh, that's fantastic. I heard a mentor of mine told me that technology used for, cars where it warns you that a car is too close is being applied to clothing. And he told me this years ago. And he said it's so precise that if it does a circular sew, like around this arm, right, to connect this arm to this body of this shirt, it's so precise that the final needle point as it goes around will be the exact same hole as where it started. That's how precise it could be. So hopefully you're right, and I hope this stuff comes back. All right, dyslexia, not that you said this one, but I'll include myself in there. ADHD, are those problems or are those superpowers for a young kid who's confused and not fitting in the box of school and society?
so I have to say, I think both, because when we're kids and when we're young, and hell, even as we're adults, there's being different for the right reasons and choosing to be different is always something to be embraced and fun. But when you're
Mhm.
different as a result of something that's out of your control, now in hindsight, I wouldn't change anything, but it hands down greatest gift I ever got. But it definitely is a trial by fire. And it's a way of being forced to look at things and learn things. Just like with ADHD, I'm sure you had to come up with 100 different techniques that empowered you to do things in a different way. But as a result, it put you down a different path and gave you a different skill set that's outside of the norms. But for me in the '80s, the idea of entrepreneurship, that was a dirty word. It was, if you decided you wanted to be quote unquote an entrepreneur, if it was something other than like, starting a bar or a restaurant or whatever, for the most part, you were going to be chastised. And the idea that you would ever get a job in a corporate world was almost non-existent. Versus now, it's really celebrated and it's embraced and it's encouraged and people try and nurture it. And you end up with a lot of phonies, I think, that are out there trying to help people with it.
Did
So I
you
don't
ever
know.
have
Go
did
ahead.
you ever have a regular job?
I did for a couple of years, right out of college. Initially, I worked for a company called REI, the outdoor
Hmm.
equipment company,
Yeah,
and
great stores.
I was gonna just throw the life to the wind and just, really live a happy, healthy life and not worry about the money and everything else. And because of some challenges there, it didn't work out and ended up, so I kept my company, kept building some others. And so I worked resort retail and managed retail clothing stores for a few years in Vail and on the West Coast and all over the place. But that was very short lived and it repeatedly taught me what I did not want to experience by
Yeah.
work.
So you said you like that REI lifestyle when you were an employee there, and I think that it's an amazing lifestyle. I love those stores, by the way. But you went a different direction. What happened to your work-life balance or the way you wanted to live your life? How did that change? What happened?
So a lot of different things impacted it, but I call myself the hippie capitalist, which kind of sounds silly, but I have a bunch of travel beads that go back, to where I've traveled all over the world, and I am really happy and healthy. And when I land in a third world place and I don't know where I'm staying that night, or if I'm sleeping in the dirt backpacking, I love that. But I'm also really, really good at helping companies make a lot of money. So I have the Rolex on this wrist. So this is the hippie and this is the capitalist. And Joel, it took me forever to realize I used to think I had to be one or the other, that it was a binary choice. And I finally started to really embrace that no, man, I've been built exactly how the world intended, and that I get to do both. So I live here, but I help, I was in Chicago at one of the nicest hotels doing strategic advisory work last week. I sometimes I'm in my sprinter van, hipster sprinter van with the Starlink on top and coaching, publicly traded CEOs. We live in a time where we get to completely break the fucking rules. There's no rules. It's just up to what we think is possible and what we find is unreasonable. So for me, it's always been the idea of balance. I've come to fully embrace and believe that balance is bunk. I don't think it's possible anymore. But I
So how
think
does a CEO, what's a bet, well, from your experience coaching all these CEOs, how could they have, what is a good balance? I mean, is there a 90-10, 80-20? How does it work? What's good?
I I, I think a healthy work-life integration is 100% possible. But the idea of balance, because of the devices we carry, because of the expectations that we have, if we lose control of those narratives, then we're never going to have any balance or integration. But one of the things that I work with when I'm working with a CEO is we do a full holistic assessment. And I can tell you where they can get the tool, but it's for free. But it to me, when a great CEO is being an amazing father and an amazing husband, and they're actually exercising and they're getting a great night's sleep, they actually become a better leader. They're going to become a better in how they choose and make their decisions. Now, let's be honest, sometimes we're going to have to spend that 90-10 all in at work. That's the way it is. We're entrepreneurs. That's how we're wired.
But
Anybody who says, well, you're only
that
going to
could
do
be a
40 hours.
season, right?
Yeah, but it's seasons. Exactly. But like my wife and I, we traditionally take anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months off a year.
Is
Very,
that
very proactive, intentional, where we schedule international trips, doing big, long through hikes in different parts of the world or adventure travel in different areas. But when I'm there with my clients, and my clients can call me, and if somebody's got hair on fire and the world's exploding, they call me on a Sunday night. I will be there for it. Now they know there's parameters and boundaries, but it's establishing those boundaries and putting clearer intention on what is important, not what is noise. I think we have more than enough time in the world, period. But we allow the noise to get in the way too much.
so? What do you recommend to a CEO who just, man, he can't let go? He's been doing this for 2 decades straight and he hasn't taken time off. And when he's home with his kids, he's checking his phone constantly. And that's got to lead to a burnout, right? I felt that when I was working all the time. How do you help that guy or gal get to that point where they could start letting go? Is it a little time block here and there? How do you do that?
So I believe that every organization, team, individual goes through one of four phases: stabilize, visualize, strategize, and execute. And when we're starting to stabilize, I can meet with that CEO and I can talk about strategy and vision. But the reality is if that guy's just running around in reactionary shit show mode, we got to get some breathing room to where it's simple little things. Like one of the first questions I ask is like, how are you sleeping? They'll be like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? It's like, well, I mean, that helps you understand, are you being proactive or are you being reactive? That's your biggest competitive advantage, is when you're really well rested, you make better decisions. So we may start with something as simple as some techniques on how to rest and sleep better. We may talk with, get your goddamn phone out of the room, leave it in another room, and go to bed so you're not scrolling doing stupid stuff. Invest a little bit of time thinking about some positive things. If they're into the hippie voodoo stuff, we'll talk about meditation. I'm all over that stuff. If they're not, think about positive thoughts before you drift off to sleep. When you come home, spend 20 minutes and put your phone in a drawer and go sit across the table from your partner and look in their eyes and say, tell me how your day was. You mentioned that you'd had Gary Chapman on. My wife had dinner with Gary Chapman. I was able to help coordinate with about 10 years ago. And she's a therapist, but it's meeting those people with what their love language is, and understanding that, but being ultra present. Joel, I think the biggest thing is the greatest gift we can give anyone, including ourselves right now, is to be present. We live in such a noisy, distracted world. We're not present. So if you can come home and if you're playing Barbie Fun Time, sit on the floor for 15 minutes and go all in on Barbie Fun Time, or be there with your spouse, or be there with your employees. Shut the damn computer down, look them in the eye, and really be present. They'll hear you. You can bend time. I firmly believe that you can start to do shit that's crazy with this. But if you start being present and you start taking care of yourself, those are the two big steps. I sort of got on a
No, I love it.
thing.
This is fantastic. So the phone, if that's part of what's keeping people from being attentive, and a big one that you said is sleep and the importance of it. I've seen that in my own life. I mean, you just go a few nights without sleeping enough, man, and you're just making bad eating decisions. You're sitting around, you're not exercising, you're probably not focusing on conversations. How do you break that habit? And maybe you're not a sleep expert, but you're an expert at helping CEOs. And if this is a big one, because we all have this technology right next to the bed or in our pocket at all times, how do you break that? Is it like any bad habit? Is it like quitting cigarettes? Because I'll give you my example. I like to put on documentaries, which is just talking, and I put that down on the table, on the night table, and I hear talking and I go to sleep. But sometimes I think, what do I do when the zombies attack? I'm not going to have this. And so I'm now being dependent on something. And the days I turn it off, I find it very difficult. How would you advise me? And I'm sure I'm not the only one with that issue.
Okay. So you want me to be candid?
Yeah.
And can I challenge you on a couple of things?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right. So one of the key things I work with people on is the mindset and the framing on how we put things. But you've put in negative reinforced mindset. You've said it 5 times. You said can't 3 times, when it's like this dude who's been doing this for 20 years or 2 years, and he can't get out of it, can't get out of it, can't get out of it. I can't do this, or it's really hard. So if you're subconscious, I think our subconscious does exactly what we need. And if you're sitting there and your subconscious like, okay, we can't do this. This sucks. This is going to blow. Okay. Got it. This sucks. Versus, all right, cool. I caught myself. I'm getting better at this. This is going to get stronger. I'm figuring this out. It's worth it. I'm happy about it. It doesn't mean that we just throw it all away. But if you can start catching yourself, it's hilarious. If I'm working with like a high dollar CEO and I quote Yoda with the Yoda voice, oh my God, it infuriates them, but they never forget it. But it's the do or do not. There is no try. So when I hear somebody say try or can't or really hard, it's like, oh, fuck it. You're giving yourself permission to fail. So why don't you just quit now? And nobody likes that. But when it's like, okay, but if you can say, look, it's a victory, I caught it. Now we'll step back and pull it in. So it's those minor shifts in doing it. And also it's genuinely buying into your heart that it's worth it and that it's okay. But to remember that we don't grow in comfort. It doesn't matter if you're lifting weights or doing an endurance event, or we don't grow in comfort. So if you're starting to be a little discomfort with that, and it's a little bit of a challenge, fucking A, you're winning because
Yeah.
you're getting something figured out. Is how I approach it.
I appreciate that. That's a great reminder. And it's funny how when I work with guys in my men's program, I can catch them constantly. But right now, you caught me saying a few things. I really appreciate that. I like it when I get called out on things. So I love that. I really appreciate it. All right, let's talk about AI because I know you know some things about that and how it's changing our world. How do you see it changing the companies of the CEOs that you coach? What's going on with that? It's a
I think
broad question.
broad question. Well, high level, I think we live in some of the most disruptive times ever. Um, and with this, there's a great book called The Rational Optimist, but that talks about how human beings are the only animals to look at the past with nothing but fondness and the future with nothing but trepidation. That's a paraphrase of it, but it's true. We look at everything, and that's how we're wired evolutionary. Is we're wired to be afraid of tomorrow, even though there is zero empirical data ever, except for some really bad war periods, that things are consistently they're getting better. So the highlight on this is that with great disruption comes great, amazing opportunity. There's beautiful things coming, but this is where we have to be able to invest the time to step back, take a breath, and figure out where we want to be going. The one guarantee is things are going to change very, very much in the next few years. Now, the other thing that's kind of a mind bender is the idea of time. Up until about 150 years ago, it was agrarian time. And we would go and we'd invest whatever time it took to milk the cow. We didn't give ourselves 7.5 minutes to go milk a cow. But then we started trading time for money. And suddenly we're still evolutionary in my mind, evolving and to adapt to that. And that's why we live in such a reactive shit show all the time, is because we aren't used to that. And we've allowed the clock to control everything else. But when it comes to AI, there is no time. It's only limited by bandwidth and computing power. So the changes that we've had in the past, we're going to become the biggest challenge in that the changes are going to happen so fast because there is no time in that space. It's only limited by computing power. And AI, when properly fed and started, can go 100,000 years in growth in 20 minutes. And so for us, our job is to be able to step way back and think about it. And I teach this with the idea of 3 horizons. There's one horizon that's where we are today. And this means that we have knowledge, we have tools, we have skills, and we got to keep the trains running, keep the bills paid and things running. Fair enough. There's a far horizon, which is sort of what we speculate could be with AI and what the tools are and where those are. So like for me, I'm firmly convinced that in 5 years, there will be AI coaches who can read people, be more intuitive, and actually answer questions in a lot of cases better because they'll be more present, they'll be clearer, and they'll be able to offer different alternatives.
And it'll have unlimited expertise based on all the inputs it's had over the last 5 years at that point.
And it won't matter how it slept last night or if it got an argument. So if that's where we are and where we're going, so for me, ideally, like next month, I'm going to be rolling out an AI avatar. That's an AI avatar that has my multiple books, hundreds of blog posts, videos, and everything, all that dumped into it from a resource perspective. And you're going to be able to ask a virtual Khris, dude, how would I handle this? Now, to start with, it's going to be lumpy, but I think, and this is the long-winded answer to your question, if we know where we are and we have the resources and tools and commodities that exist, and we know roughly where we want to go, the ability to build the adaptive framework, the middle horizon, on how we can use the tools that currently exist, but create a framework and on-ramp so that as new tools come in, we're going to be able to build and adapt on it itself, will allow people to be the early adopters that end up where we want to be in the future. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you something that happened, and you mentioned it. There's a guy went through my program, and he explained that before he started the program, he had young guy, and he hit over $1 million in revenue. He was making a few hundred thousand net profit, young entrepreneur. And then this last year, it plummeted. He wasn't making a profit. He lost some good clients. At the same time, he lost his girlfriend, just coincidentally. So he was going through a lot. And he used Chat GPT to help guide him. He would tell it how it's feeling, and he would ask for suggestions. And Chat GPT would spit back at him, try this, give this some thought. And that became his counselor. And it was at his beck and call at any minute, at any time, at 3 in the morning. And maybe one idea wasn't a good one, but then he'd ask for more and he'd get a good idea. So there's already some power behind that. A little scary at the same time because we don't know what it's going to lead to. And when you said that 100,000 years of development and evolution can happen in a few minutes or days or weeks or months, it's hard to comprehend that in our brain, right?
It is. But I think, we tend to go to like the movie scariness of, the world taking over. But we've got a lot of big challenges in the world that can be solved. There's a lot of wonderful things. I mean, yeah, all right. Figure out a way to make me a billionaire and solve climate change. Okay, great. Here you go. Or how do we transition the starvation issues and challenges we're going to have? Because we're going to see unfortunately, some massive geopolitical challenges happen in the next 10 years as well. And that almost scares me more with what's going to happen, just because you look at the population implosions that are happening, whether it be in China, even in Germany, Korea, and some of these other places. And when you start thinking about the impact of losing 2/3 of your workforce on a supply chain that is the world is globally dependent on, there are going to be some other challenges coming out. But we're really good at solving problems. And I think we will be, and it'll get better. Now, the challenge is we don't know what it looks like. And that's what, as humans, we hate.
Yeah,
We
that's the
don't
scary
know.
part.
Right. But it's like, all right, well, how do we just enjoy the journey for what it is and soak it up and be able to take that step back and figure out, well, where do we want to go? Where are those opportunities? And how can we help those areas?
What you just described is, if you watch the news and you hear all this noise that's going on, it probably builds up that anxiety because you are worried about future problems that haven't even gotten here yet. Like what you just posed, what if there's not enough people, then what happens to all the jobs? And, who knows? Computers will take over and manufacturing will be run by machines. Who knows? How do leaders, and I keep referencing leaders because I know you really are an expert and you help leaders, you help CEOs. How do you help them get rid of noise? Do you tell them to turn off the news or what? How do you start lowering that noise?
That I don't actually tell people to do that, but I can tell you that the vast majority tend to go that direction.
You see a benefit?
Oh, massive. And it doesn't mean that you stick your head in the sand, and it doesn't mean you don't have an opinion, and it doesn't mean you're not passionate. But there are things in this world we can control, and there are things in this world we can't. And I would so much rather be putting my energy towards the things that I can control, that I can have a positive impact, where I can give back, and what I can do. That to me is what lights me up. I coached a Navy SEAL commander for a while, and he had a great saying that the operators, the special forces operators use, and it's don't endure any pain until it happens. And I'm like, holy shit, man! I used to be the king of enduring pain, getting all wrapped up, completely wrapped around the axle and shit I can't control. And it's like, it doesn't help, so there's no value there. But I don't
Yeah.
know, what do you think, Joel?
Well, Mark Twain said that, many a sleepless nights have I spent worrying about things that never came true. I've done that. When I was early on as an entrepreneur, man, I would lay in bed and think about every problem and I couldn't sleep. And I'd spend an entire night, maybe sleeping an hour or two, and then go work for 12 hours and try to lead my teams and then go home just dead, exhausted, probably made bad decisions, probably reacted negatively because of those things. Um, so, what is, in your opinion? Yeah, go ahead.
A quick suggestion on that. Sometimes this lands, sometimes it doesn't. So I'll throw it out there. But when I have somebody who's dealing with monkey brain like that, I encourage that they do a couple of things when they get ready to go. One, stay away from the device and any negativity for, if you can, go for a walk for an hour, just to sort of calm down, put different endorphins in your head. Two, have a split personality conversation with your subconscious and say, look, subconscious, dude, I know you got a lot going. Hammer away, work on that all night, but I really got to get some rest. Just leave me the hell alone. I got to get some sleep. So you got to work on that in the morning. I can't wait to hear what you come up with. And then say, look, I give myself permission to let my subconscious work on that and just sleep. It is amazing how you can sometimes really control even that, to where it lets people go, boom. And then if you do wake up, say, hey, cool, caught myself, rather than going, God, you piece of shit. Now you're going to go down that road and you're going to spiral. Before you know it, it'll be 4 a.m. It's like, subconscious, like, all right, it's only 3 now, but I'll keep you up for another hour. So I think that we can talk ourselves, or we can spin it better in our brain in a different way. Just 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It was the days that this hasn't happened in a decade or two, but it was in the beginning where it was a wheel. It was a hamster wheel going in circles in my brain and repetitive. I already thought about that. No, but I got to think about it again, right? It was when I finally would say, like, you know what? I don't care if I sleep or not. And that put me to sleep, right? It was when I stopped worrying about, I'm not going to get enough sleep. There's only 4 more hours and I really need six. And when I let that go, I started relaxing and feeling better. The other trick that I started implementing is, sometimes our parents tell us things and we don't listen. But it hit me once that I remember when I was a kid, my dad would tell me that this is before technology was around like it is today. He said that when he would think about a problem in the middle of the night about work and it kept him up, he started adopting, because someone gave him the suggestion, having a little tablet of paper next to the bed and writing down the problem or a potential solution, whatever, and that would allow him to go back to bed. So I started doing that back then. And it helped me because I got it off my chest. And now, like you said, the subconscious, the programming is working in the background, hopefully to improve that. All right. Like I said before, you're an expert, Khris, on working with CEOs and leaders. What's the job of a great leader? If I'm leading a team of however many people, and I don't want to have all the rocks. I don't want to carry everything. I just want to run the show. The reason I got in business is to run a show, not to be the low level guy doing everything. But a lot of CEOs that I see are worried about a lot of things in their business. I don't know if I'm asking what's the solution, how do you get rid of that, or what's the job? What's the real job of a CEO?
So I think the real job of CEO somewhat depends on, and you and I talked pre-show, on the season, where they are at with it. If it's startup, if you're in startup mode, you may have to be chief cook, bottle washer, waiter, everything. That's the reality. Suck it up. That's the deal. But most of the organizations that I'm working with, the skills they've got from here to here, it's a different set of skills that they need to get from where they are to where they want to be. And the CEOs start to have that self-awareness that they're becoming the bottleneck. They're becoming the choke point in the growth of the organization. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. So the 3 primary obligations of a senior leader, without any question, are number 1, being crystal clear on where is the organization going. You mentioned Mark Twain. My favorite quote from Mark Twain is, "I'm sorry this letter's so long, I didn't have time to write a short one." Mm-hmm. Invest the time and energy to be crystal clear on a vision of where we're going. One of my favorite examples of this, whether you love him or hate him, is Elon Musk at SpaceX. You walk into SpaceX, there are 2 giant pictures on the wall. One is as Mars sits today. One is as Mars as a colonized planet. The people who go to work there aren't doing it because they're working a 30-hour work week and they've got great balance, or that it's the best place to work first. No, they're contributing to that. So the number one obligation is a clear vision of where we're going. Second, stealing from Collins, is getting the right people. They share your values. They're in lockstep with who you are, and they're in the right seats. They're exceptional at what they do. When I got to study entrepreneurial strategy at Harvard Business School, and that's one of the two critical things that really impact when companies hit the hockey stick. Stop putting somebody in that seat who could do it, or they're smart and they'll figure it out, or they'll work it out. I want somebody who's a badass, who's done this 10 times before, is going to wade in and say, no, 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 give it to me. I want it. I'm going to show you how we do this. And they're open and honest, and they'll have conversations. So first is clear vision. Second is amazing people who embrace that vision and know how they're contributing for that success. And you give them the tools. And then third is going to be building and maintaining the big relationships. Big relationships can be whether it be with your team, or it could be external, it could be elephant hunting, it could be awareness of the organization, but it's the three primary areas. You do that well, everything else is going to start to run. Now, that's an aspirational thing, candidly, for most organizations. But when we can aspire and we define a vision of what amazing can look like and where we want to go, then it's a matter of breaking it down, mechanics, and how we will build it.
So that's the responsibilities of a leader then, preparing that, be the visionary and set that vision, right? And feed it so that people get
Clear,
it.
simple vision that you preach over and over and over.
Yeah.
Clear, simple vision. Yep.
And get people engaged with it. And then speaking of people, having the right, amazing people in the right seats. And then you're a relationship builder. So those are three key things. Does that cover everything? Is that pretty much what a leader should be focusing on?
I think there's a fair amount of problem solving and negotiating. I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni. I've been able to spend some time with him, but for team health, I'm a huge believer that you have to have conflict in a healthy team. Now, it needs to be a vulnerability-based conflict, not a fiefdom or silos or ego conflict. And it's in those areas where you can have people who are passionate and they're curious and they're still listening to each other. And once in a while, they're going to hit a loggerhead. And that's where the CEO needs to come in and break that tie. Say, no, this is how we're going to do it. Be curious, understanding both sides, but to put that in there. But when a CEO understands that and builds a great vision, wonderful. Now, some of the other areas for the big relationships could be some of the strategic thinking around acquisitions. I do a fair amount of work in the private equity space where we do roll-ups, where we'll buy a bunch of other companies. And it's amazing how you can buy companies with almost no money. So if you do it right, but you set up the right structures, there's systems to where you start doing that, and we build the strategies around how are we going to do these acquisitions, how do they fit from a synergistic fit, but defining again where we want to go. Helping an organization choose to say, yes, we want to be audacious as hell. We want to grow to $1 billion and we're only at 20 million today. Cool. How are we going to figure that out? So first we have to have a vision, and then we start figuring out what the strategy is to go and execute.
That's interesting. You applied these points to acquisitions too, because you have to build that relationship with the company you're acquiring, the leadership there, and sell them on the vision. And that could, if I'm understanding correctly, that could mean less money down for that business because now they're willing to come along for the ride with you as the bigger company, right?
Absolutely, and values too. If you have a company that does not share your values, regardless of what your values are, it doesn't mean they're a bad company. But if you acquire them, unless you're going to do a wholesale firing and only use the assets and resources within, you are walking into a buzzsaw, and it is going to do nothing but absorb a shitload of time. But when you find people that truly share your values and they see your vision, and you give them an opportunity to participate in that vision in the longer run, there's ways that you could do new structures, new process, all sorts of things to where you can do it. I've bought companies, I've helped people buy companies with no money, or maybe it's minimum, or we find different ways of doing it. But again, it comes down to for a lot of really high-end CEOs, especially entrepreneurial CEOs, they take for granted the value of having a vision. It's not something that everybody sees, but if you see in your world visionary sight, that's all you ever see, well, then you have no idea that other people don't see that.
You got to share it.
And it's so it's helping people, but it's also refining that and simplifying it, clarifying this is no, this is what it is, this is where we're going. And people will get attracted to that and they'll want to jump on board.
You know, years ago, I had a right-hand guy helping me run my businesses, and he one time got frustrated with me that the team did not share in the passion. They just didn't get it. They didn't see it. And I wasn't going into the office very much back then at that point, after building it for a long time. And I asked him, I said, well, remember, you and I get together on a phone, on multiple phone calls a day. A couple times a week, we go to lunch and we talk about this stuff all the time. Are you doing that with them? And he stopped and said, oh man, you're right. I've never shared the vision with them. Of course, they're going in different directions. I go, perfect, great discovery just from me asking him that question. And then it started shifting. He started taking the employees to lunch. He would pull them aside and say, all right, look, good. You're doing it the way we want to go in that direction. Here's why. And that got everybody on board. So you're absolutely right. You told me earlier before we recorded about scheduling, and I love this because I'm a scheduling king. Scheduling time to think. Talk about that. Why is that important? What's that even mean?
I thought it was interesting because you had some, I put that as one of the questions and you said it's just, did you not finish that? Or it's like no, it's one of those areas where I think I believe that we live in so much noise and we measure success for most of us by investing all this time in doing and accomplishing, but not thinking. And I think thinking is some of the most valuable tools we can have. I use the example of I'm a Nebraska kid, and if you ever seen Warren Buffett's calendar, he'll show you his calendar, and he'll go through and he'll be like, nothing, nothing. Oh, on Thursday I'm getting a haircut. All the guy does is think, is read and research and think. And we are so easily sucked into the noise of busyness that it doesn't work. So I personally, my chief of staff scheduled me 3 4 hour blocks a week where I like to go for big hikes or mountain bike ride or a long gravel ride. Just and in that time, it allows me and the process for my subconscious to have time to think. I worked with a gentleman who runs some multi-billion-dollar nonprofits. The first time he came in, he sat across the table from me, just plopped down. He goes, all right, I'm here. Like, well, okay, why? It's like, well, so-and-so said I should come talk to you. So, okay, so we started talking. He left there with 2 action items. One was to schedule a date with his wife once a week without his phone. And 2, to turn his phone off and turn the radio off when he was driving in from a 45-minute commute to work.
Alone,
Alone.
in silence.
And long story short is we developed this more and more and more down the road. But he ended up at the end of the year, we were doing a full session with his team and he pulled me aside and said, dude, I really want to thank you because you taught me how to think this year, where he started realizing that highest and best use for him is to give himself that space to actually let his subconscious come out. The analogy I like to use is if you've ever stood in the shower for an extra 2 minutes, just let the hot water roll over your head. It's usually in that time where your subconscious comes up with like, bing, oh my God, if we do that, it's going to change the world. Or holy smokes, I move these 2 people around, that everything gets easier. The intention is how can you start leaning into that and growing and cultivating that? And as the senior leader, you may end up making a lot fewer decisions, you should, but they're going to be a lot bigger decisions. And this is where investing that time and energy so that you're really investing the time to think and to find the direction, to find the right people, to find the clarity and the vision, to find the relationships. Those are the things that are going to help you with that. So,
You know, after running my company for, I don't know, at that time, let's call it 10, 12, 15 years, very engaged and there every day and in on every conversation that employees had. You know, when I was young and I was just starting and hiring people and getting going, I got to a point where I realized I didn't have to be there every day, and I started stepping away a little bit from those things. And my number two, one day after a few months of me being out of the day to day, maybe going in once a week and calling him every day and being engaged, he said to me, I don't know what you're doing and how you're coming up with these really good ideas, but keep doing it. And I came to realize I'm not doing anything special. I'm just not in the day to day anymore. Now it's just I'm going out for jogs, I'm riding bike, working out more, I'm doing all these great things for me, but the brain was free and clear to think of more creative things. And I always thought I was not a creative person, but ideas just kept coming when I got out of the weeds and the putting out the fires. So I love that you said that. It explains a lot. Why did you have that CEO of a multi-billion dollar nonprofit? Why did you have him book a date with his wife without a phone once a week? How is that significant to that guy's life and his business? And
Well, for him, he really valued his relationship with his spouse and his kids, and that's who he is. And and with this, I don't believe. So let me rephrase it a different way. Um, I've worked with a couple of really big CEOs, like unicorn CEOs, who had more money than they ever were going to spend, but their spouses hated them,
mm,
kids hated them, they weren't fit, they hated themselves. They were not happy people. They had made a bunch of money, but they weren't successful. And as a result, they were making bad decisions and going in bad directions. I think that if you are a great husband, if you're a great wife, if you are a great dad, if you're taking care of yourself, it's in those times that you're giving yourself permission to be the best you possible. And if you genuinely are going to be a great leader, you need to be the best you, period. That means you need to be rested. That means and it doesn't mean that we don't have challenges at home sometimes. But if those challenges come to work, you're not going to be as good at work as you could be. Or if work goes home, vice versa. So it's embracing that we can't have it all. I genuinely, it's fucking unreasonable and I don't care. I believe we can have it all, but we have to put the intentionality behind them. And when we do that, we get better. But the biggest thing, Joel, that I see over and over and over is that when people start to become holistically better, they become better across the board. They expand as a person. Their abilities, everything becomes stronger. So if you're really great at making money, but you suck at your health and your personal lives, you're actually limiting the growth you can have on money. And not everybody believes me with that, but I've seen it over and over and over. Versus if you can treat everything, then everything expands together.
and even if you're wrong on that, it's okay. At least you got the person to take better care of their health. Let's say that that health doesn't make them more money, which I disagree. I agree with you. I think it does. But even if you're wrong, okay, well, they're not going to get any better at making money, but they're already good at it. And now they just made their health better. So it's a win-win, whichever direction you look at that. So, oh, by the way, that you got me thinking. I was having lunch with the CEO of a company. He's very young, and by today, I'm sure he's a billionaire, but he was about to hit that billionaire status. And he told me about a situation that happened at his company where an employee fell from a very high ladder and got hurt. And he just kind of said it in passing, and that got to me. I go, oh my God, is he okay? And I started asking questions about him, and he said, I don't even know his name, and he didn't care. Uh, that hit me so hard because there are people who are great at making money, and we applaud them and we read their stories, and they become heroes for many. But for me, that day was a realization that I like making money. I'm pretty good at it. I've had a pretty good track record. But if I never make another dollar, but I can worry about people and care about them, that's more important to me. So, there are cases, and I'm just lining up with what you said about there are some people who are very great. They're great at making money, but they're missing some parts of their life, which keeps them from really being successful.
I've got a full course, and it's one of the key things I do my speaking events on is redefining success, life on your terms. And long story short is I had my hip and my knee replaced at the same time.
Mm.
And I was forced to be down, which I'm not good at being down. Um, but I started watching some daytime TV, which scared the shit out of me. I learned what Kardashian was, and you see that franchise. You know, here are beautiful people who have all the stuff, all the accolades, all the money. And I'm just like, wow, that's how I've been measuring success. And I realized that I was measuring it the same way as the Kardashians, and it really made me feel dirty. And I don't, if other people are that way, that's fine. And don't get me wrong, man, I love my material stuff. But I'd watch these other shows about these guys in Alaska who had nothing, and they'd make 10 grand a year, but they couldn't go through a show without saying how full of gratitude they were, how fortunate they felt. And it really, it turned the whole narrative in my head right, on its ear with the idea of what is success? And we get to redefine that. But helping people define it differently and look at it differently is one of the challenges.
That's not that I'm comparing them in any way, but when I was a teenager, somebody told me, it was on the radio actually, they said that they were talking about people with Down syndrome, mentally retarded, which is what it was called when I was a kid. They said that those are some of the happiest people on earth. And I remember at the time, I was 19 or 20, and I was working 80 hours a week and just grinding, trying to get ahead, trying to get this little business off the ground while I worked one or two full-time jobs. And I remember thinking for a moment, that wouldn't be so bad. If they're really that happy, trading off, what's the difference? You're not going to know the difference. If you could trade off with them, you might be so much happier. All right. I want to ask you before we run out of time here, because this comes up a lot for me. It happened to me and it happens to a lot of the guys in my program. And it's about feeling like an imposter, that imposter syndrome, kind of, how did I get here? How do I have the success? Wait till people find out who I really am. What is that? Why does that affect us? And do you see that with the level of CEOs that you coach?
No, not at all. It's only you.
I knew it.
No, no. Anybody who's not a sociopath who says they don't have imposter syndrome is lying to you. Point blank. Everybody goes through that
Good to know.
because that's part of what it is. It makes us human, and it also, but it's that awareness of understanding that. Well, why am I worried about this? And so if you let it dominate you, then there's zero value. If you can identify what are the motivations around it, that to me is one of the key things. Have you heard of the hedonic treadmill or hedonic
No.
adaptation? So the hedonic treadmill is the uptight psychology term for keeping up with the Joneses. Or we're always moving those goalposts. It's our ability to become comfortable with a situation that's uncomfortable. And we usually associate it with growing and finance. So sometimes that imposter syndrome comes up with, oh, I'm at this group and I flew in on my private jet, but then I'm at the airport and everybody else has a G5 and I have a citation. And it sounds crazy, but I feel like, well, should I even be here? But you flew on a private. I've literally had teams put up on the issues board during their annual session that they didn't like the jet they had. So those were ones I chewed out. But I think that everybody goes through that. But if you can say, one, acknowledge it, again, control that narrative and don't beat yourself up and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Is it legitimate? Is there something I could do to get stronger at it? How can I get better? But don't let it dominate your head. One of but the key pieces are like, it's going to come up. Cool. Like, own it. Say, all right, why am I having this? Well, I'm embarrassed because of my house or my stuff or my whatever. Right? Does that really matter? Well, it doesn't matter to me. Okay, so then you're letting somebody else control that narrative of imposter syndrome. And then, but okay, yeah, actually, I don't understand these things. Okay, fine. Who can help guide you through those things? Or I don't know. So that as a strategic advisor, that's probably my biggest value is I create an environment where I say I have to show up every session 100% prepared to get fired. Fearless, but compassionate, but trusted. So people will ask me a question. Is that, dude, what do you think about this? And you can tell even by the tone, they're afraid of saying it in front of anyone. God knows they can't let their board hear it. They can't let their team hear it, but they're worried about this. And then they end up in monkey brain and they end up in that doom loop. And that just doesn't build. So it's like, cool. But helping people and creating an environment where you can have those conversations. And candidly, Joel, your groups that you do are beautiful and fantastic. And if people could have those conversations and that safety, that will help get through the imposter syndrome in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because there are sometimes they cannot have those conversations with their teams immediately or even their spouse. They need to sometimes have a guy like you or a group that they can work with. I was building a business and I was driving a Toyota Corolla and it was probably 7 years old at that point, and it was a fine car. Nothing was wrong with it. And I remember thinking, man, people must think that I don't do so well. I was already making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in net profit, but that wasn't the intention. I needed to build this thing higher, and I did. But if I would have focused, if I would have allowed it to take me in that direction of no, 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 I got to show the world how successful I am. Especially, I was in a wholesale business. I was in a little tiny warehouse. I didn't have any glamour and I didn't need it because I just went to trade shows, put my wares, people liked them, they placed orders on my apparel, and I send it to them. I didn't need a fancy office. I didn't need a fancy car. I wasn't seeing my clients. They were all over the world. I was in my little warehouse in South Florida. But I have seen the situation for young guys where they need to show it off. And now the resources go into the things that didn't matter, and then they're not able to build that business. Is that part of imposter syndrome that you want to look the part?
Oh, I think sometimes it's an insecurity, fake it till you make it. I actually on Friday, just this last Friday, I had a team, a guy been coaching for quite a while, got a great exit, got the brass ring, 42, more money than he ever dreamed. And what I encouraged for him was for him to go and to celebrate. There's nothing wrong with celebrating. And if he likes Ferraris, then go buy a Ferrari. If he wants to do those things, but if you're doing it because you love it, fine. If you're doing it to show off to a bunch of other people, you got to check that motivation and say, why am I doing this? If you, so I think it really comes down to managing the narrative in your head and trying clearly to understand the motivations. Now, if you're in a group and you're showing off and you feel that, and you're getting judged for that, maybe, but candidly, it sounds like probably the wrong group to me.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
have seen that sometimes in some sales groups and different areas where you've got to show off a little bit. But I have found more often than not, when if you have the internal confidence, when when you when you go up to the country club and everybody's got a Maserati or a G-Wagon and you park the Corolla there and you walk in with the same confidence, it's going to get the right people's attention because they'll be like, oh my God. But now if you go in and you're like, well, I don't know if I should be here,
Mm.
then people will sense that. But if you walk in like you own the joint and be like, holy shit, that guy really doesn't care. Do you see that POS he's driving? Like, wow. But I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. And today, I've had many cars since that Corolla, but today I drive a Kia, and I buy all my cars about 2 years old. I buy them cash. I don't have debt. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have any. Years ago, when I was 22 years old, I read The Millionaire Next Door, and it showed me that I was going on that path. And I said, okay, I feel comfortable doing that. It also helps that I saw Jeff Bezos in a documentary back in like the late 90s, I think, early 2000s, driving, I think it was a Honda or an Accord, some simple car. And I think he was a billionaire already at the time. So that gave me that, that confidence of, okay, I could do my own thing. So I like that. All right. You've mentioned, okay, you coach, you have programs. Tell us about those programs. Who is a good fit for those programs? Are they run by you? Are they videos you've produced? I don't know. So tell me all about that.
So new website is finally coming up. I finally relented, but it'll be chriskluber.com. And
KRIS.
yeah, Chris with a K, Kluber with a K, KLUB as in Victor ER.
Yep.
And it has everything in there. I have my first book was The Aspiring Solopreneur. It did pretty well. And I've got a whole course on there if people are looking to transition to start like a lifestyle solopreneur type gig. Read the book. It's super safe. And we've got a whole course associated with it if people are interested. YouTube channels on that.
Do people ever do like that course and then they become a one-on-one client coaching?
To be candid, usually for the solopreneurs, unless it's a really high-end type of business, I'm a little more expensive than most solopreneurs.
Sure. But they could jump in that program and get a good amount of your
Absolutely.
knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is it's a, I love it. So if they have questions, I'll answer. I'll get somebody to answer.
Great.
Um, got another program called Life on Your Terms, which is specifically focused on defining what success looks like in a different way and actually do strategic planning for your life. A lot of times you do this with spouses, and I do a lot of speaking events on that. But I primarily do strategic advising and strategy work where with high level CEOs. I have a team of people that if I'm not an ideal fit, I've got other coaches online. But three things that we look for if I'm going to choose to work with someone. Number one, do they have a self-awareness that they're becoming the bottleneck, but an innate desire to be bigger? Two, are they in an industry that's disruptive or potential? Are they willing to be disruptive? And then three, are they willing to dream audaciously? And what I mean by that is if they want to grow 15, 20% next year, that's fantastic, but I'm not your huckleberry. If they want to grow 100x over the next 5 years, that's a much narrower, more challenging path, but it becomes a great forcing device to say no to all the horse shit. And I love doing that. That's
Yeah.
what leads me.
Well, the beautiful thing is with your experience, you get to choose those clients now. So you're getting the cream of the crop who really want to take it to the next level. Khris, it's been a pleasure, man. I've learned a lot speaking to you, and I love the way that you live your life out there in Denver and traveling the world. Last question before we head off. What's your favorite place that you've been to in the world?
Hmm. My wife and I met. I sold a business in '98, took a year, travel around the world, blew all the proceeds, and hit all 7 continents in a poser move. And we're going back to Antarctica for a 3-week adventure cruise next February. It's probably my most favorite place I've ever been. It's just
Antarctica.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. I've only heard of, yeah, those cruises that go down there. I gotta check that out one day.
So, well, Joel, thank you very, very much for everything. I really enjoyed this, and thank you for letting me ramble on so much.
No, this has been fantastic. Great value to me and the listeners. All right, Khris, thanks a lot. Have a great day.